Hey guys, so for my next video I'm actually going to walk you through what one of my projects is for this weekend for the LARP that's going to be next weekend. Is I have to make myself a scabbard because the sword I have doesn't really suit just a belt loop. I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to walk you through how I'm doing that and kind of the bits and pieces along the way. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you watch every stitch I rip out of this. We'll just go through the steps and the final process. So what I'm starting with this is basically that, which is someone's old fake fur vest thing. Okay, not terribly pretty. So you can tell when you look at it that's been stitched together so many times, but we're now going to make it into something useful because that is my sword. Okay? Now if you look at it you'll notice it's wider at that end than it is down here, but it's only got this tiny little bit to grip onto in its scabbard. So if it's got a belt loop that's got to be wide enough to fit down at that end, anytime I go walking around in the field that's just going to bounce and come loose. So if I end up coming across a big baddie that I have to fight, my sword is going to be 20 feet behind me in the grass and of absolutely no use. So currently I am ripping the stitches out of this so that I can use the main back body piece. And I would like to point out one very handy little thing. If you are medically inclined or know anybody who is, that is a dissection kit. And actually, when it comes to doing sewing stuff, it is really, really handy because it contains some really fun stuff. Not only does it contain scissors and tweezers, it usually also contains needle holders, which is, let's see if I can zoom in on it here, this lovely implement right here. Okay? That is a needle holder. Reason why needle holders are really handy is because of this bit at the top, okay, which locks. It's got teeth that overlock. So when I clamp down on something, sorry, I'm getting used to my camera here. When I clamp down on something, that's not going to let go, which is really handy when, in this particular instance, I'm pulling apart the edge, but I don't want to lose the string that's holding the furry seam folded over. So you can see there that the fur seam is folded over, which I want to keep, but I want to pull apart the main body of it. So what it's actually done is I've clamped onto the thread that's holding the seam of the folded over fur so that when I come back I can tie a knot in it. So basically I don't have to worry about that edge getting ripped through and coming out and coming all apart because it's got this lovely clamped on metal tool at the end of it, which is just all kinds of awesome. Okay, now that we've finished pulling off the front panels of the aforementioned faux fur vest, you can see we were left with just this back piece here, which is a nice long piece of brown furry material. And that's what we're going to make our scabbard from. So you can see I've already got my sword laid out kind of roughly where I want it. So what will end up happening is essentially, with me here, it will be folded over like that and then stitched along this edge. We'll stitch it in quite tight up here and then along this edge, so that way it'll be tight enough up here to hold this, but still allow enough room that you'll be able to draw the sword out of it. Now you may be asking, why on earth are you using fur or fake fur on the inside of a scabbard? Well, there's a couple of good reasons. One, it makes it much easier to draw your weapon out of it, so it's a little less likely to stick. If you have just leather or some other fabric, you tend to get a lot of friction with it, and it can sometimes be a problem with pulling your sword. And the other advantage is, in a situation like this, it will, because I've got a sword that has some narrow areas and some thick areas, the fur will hold it quite snugly because it'll compress around the different areas and then lay flat if it's a wider area, and it'll provide a nice snug hold over the different widths of the sword. So, advantages of fur. Yay! Okay, so now comes the fun part. Now I have to try and stitch it up. That that is my lovely sewing machine. I love it to pieces, but I don't think I've got a correct needle for stitching something that's this thick. It may not be real fur, but it's not the thinnest stuff in the world. So I might have to hand stitch this, which could get rather ugly. But we'll see how I get on. If it goes well, I'll probably demonstrate the hand stitch that I do, because it'll undoubtedly be something rather weird and probably a surgical stitch instead of a normal stitch. So, stay tuned. Okay, so now I've cut down my fabric to kind of the size and shape that I need it. Basically what you want to have happen is the fabric, when it's folded over in half, like this is, so see I've got it folded in half so that the furry bit is on the inside. So when it's folded in half, you want to make sure that you've got a bit of an edge, probably about an inch or so on either side of your weapon worth of space, so that way when it's all stitched up you'll still have plenty of room for it to slide in and out. And you also want to make sure that, at least for the one that I'm making, that the length is about the same as the sword. Now this is for two reasons. One, so obviously when you stitch it, you're going to lose a bit, and there's going to be fur inside, so that's going to take up a bit of room. So this end isn't going to sit there. By the time you get it stitched up in the fur in there, it's actually going to sit about there. So it's already moving up to the top. And secondly, you're going to somehow need to attach this to your belt. What I've got is this lovely little doohickey here. So what's going to end up happening is, see, this part goes, obviously snaps over your belt. Sword goes in there, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to then thread the scabbard through, and then I'm going to fold this furry edge down and over it. So this is going to come down sort of over top of the leather and then be tacked down. So you can see that's going to take a bit of the fabric off as well. So yeah. So I'm going to be stitching away. When I get towards the end, I'll demonstrate which stitch I'm using, because it's actually quite simple and straightforward and very handy. But at the moment, I'd rather just crack on and get most of it done, and I'll show you when I'm closer to the end. Right, so that's it all stitched up on the side. That was cut. So you're probably not going to be able to see the stitches very well, which actually should mean that they've been done correctly. Hey, hey. I was going to show you what sort of stitch I did, but I just did a simple interlocking stitch, so I didn't do anything too terribly fancy, because I decided I wanted to use the least amount of fabric possible when I was stitching it out, plus also it lets, you know, some of the fur come out and stick out, which just looks cool. So yeah, so there it is. I've fed it through my, my belt brace. So the next thing to do is to fold the fabric over the belt brace. Now, I can't obviously fold anything over here, otherwise that's going to completely defeat the purpose. So what I've done is I've removed the seam that was holding these two pieces together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to remove this piece, and then I'll fold this piece over and potentially make it shorter, because I can't decide if that's a little too much furry or not. But we shall see. Right, so that's me finished it. I've just tacked on the edges of the flap so it doesn't go anywhere, and I've cut off the other half so that this can attach to my belt. So now the only hard part is testing and making sure it works. So I'm going to pretend like this is my belt, sword, in, goes right down, tip of the sword's there, so it's got a little bit of playroom left, and easy to draw and go after baddies when they're after you. So there you go. How to make a scabbard.